guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Alana here. Welcome back to 3 Degrees of Love Divination. So, without further ado, welcome back to part 3 of my boundaries series that I had started doing. Please, if you haven't seen before, please check out part 1 and part 2, which is up on my channel right now. If you haven't seen those, please go check them out. I'll have the links up in the cards and probably down in the description box, more than likely. And also, as you know, we were working on with the tarot activity book, published under Indie Matzner by Drea Bloom. And okay, anyway, so boundaries. And of course, in the first video, I went over the objective, the background, and went over some of the questions that was outlined by Drea in the book, and of course we went over the first section, which is of the activity, which is to go through the deck and look at the cards that sort of portray weak boundaries. So that's what we've done in the first 2 videos, and of course at the end of my part 2, I did have some questions of my own that I wanted to leave you guys with. So that's where we're at, where that is concerned. And so now sort of getting into the next pile, which would be the strong boundaries, or forceful boundaries, if you will. And the reason why I say that is because if you remember in the last video, I spoke about when I was doing and reviewing the weak boundaries. Let me just go straight into, hold on. There we go, so we can see better. Yes, when I was going into the pile with the weak boundaries, I did say that there would be some cards that are repetitive, some of which probably either the colored or the black and white I probably had in the weak boundaries pile. And of course in this one, some of the cards I felt that would also oh no, this is the balanced one. Whoops, my bad. Yes. And I said that some of them would also seem to, I felt would also fit in this pile, in the strong boundaries, because it depends on the perspective, and how you're looking at it. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So we have the 10 of Feathers, and of course you're welcome to do this, to interact with this video. If you happen to be a tarot reader or you collect tarot and you have tarot decks that you would like to do this activity with, following along, by all means, you're more than welcome to. And if you have, please share with me in the comments down below how that went for you. Did you agree with some of the choices the choices that I had picked out? Were there some that maybe that you felt should have been in one category or another that maybe I didn't put there? Of course, share with me your experience with the activity. All about this channel is all about love, all about healing and doing the introspection, and getting to have a little bit of fun along the way, in the sense of where art and, sort of meets tarot and spirituality and And just, you know, another way of sort of hitting certain aspects of our healing journey and process that maybe isn't always so, you know, fun to emerge in, you know, can be very difficult at times, but that at least we're finding some sort of solace in doing the work and not running away from it. Because really and truly, running away from our shadows really only just creates more shadows, right? And part of the healing is shedding light, and bringing warmth to those aspects of self that may have been missing, or we buried, or keep hidden, you know, and that really dims the overall, you know, essence, illumination, brightness of who we all are, which at the end of the day, as I always say at the end of my videos, we are all love. So, okay. So in the strong boundaries here, we have 10 of feathers. Samson loses his strength. And this is Judges chapter 16, verse 17 to verse 19. And if you do remember this card, I did have this card in the weak boundaries pile as well. And part of that was to show, you know, because to me, this is a person who, you know, who in this card with the 10 of feathers, Samson, as he's laying there and he had been subdued, you know, he is seen here to be in a very vulnerable state. And here is someone, in this case, a feminine presenting person who is looking to take advantage of this person in his restful state, and with defenses down, right? Because he was trusting. So, you know, this person here with the knife looking to cut off his locks is someone who now is crossing boundaries and is being forceful, taking advantage of someone who is at rest. Okay, 9, the Hermit. Now, why I see this as being you know, in the aspect of strong boundaries is because, you know, in the Hermit, this is in this depiction here with the biblical tarot, and of course this is the edition that was lovingly gifted to me by Krasimir, along with the bigger guidebook, as I've mentioned before in previous videos, and the Hermit. Now, this I can definitely identify with, this being my birth card, you know, and as a Virgo, you know, the idea of, and I'm also living a very, you know, very real hermit life at the moment, and have been for some time. So, you know, that idea of strong boundaries, being isolated, right? That need for protection. And excuse me, if you remember, I previously spoke about, you know, well, this is the Hermit year. It's about going in, you know, into doing the introspection and things like that. But as an empath, you know, I burnt out doing my work as a social worker. So I was forced into hermit mode, if you will, by my own body, by divine spirit, if you will, because I was doing too much. So, and now that, I've been doing the healing work. I still continue to do so, for myself. But I'm also now at a stage where I feel like there's a progression where that is concerned. The things that I've learned, as I've gone in depth to myself, to getting to know my emotions, which I love to call my piggies. And of course they love that too, because it tickles me happy internally. My inner child is just tickled happy by the fact that I call them piggies. Anyways, so, and the only companion that this figure here in this card, John the Baptist, has is this lamb. So, right? So that can be something that is very representative of strong boundaries, in my opinion, because the hermit, the idea of being isolated, happily in your own space with no one else around to influence you in any form or fashion, and you really have the opportunity to be too connected to yourself fully, without any sort of distractions, if you will. The 7 of Candles. Now, part of why I put this here, we have David and Goliath, 1 Samuel chapter 17, and this is the 7 of Candles. And, of course, why I put this here in this pile is because of the fact that we have Goliath, who is, as depicted in this card, is someone who is very large, very muscular. Even their stance is very much in this, dominating, aggressive sort of position against what looks to be like a little boy. But in comparison, I should say, because in the actual story, in the biblical story, David is actually a man and Goliath is a giant. So, right? So even though in comparison in this portrayal, this looks like a little boy, if you really, really look, not exactly, because they in this image has muscles of their own, that, looks to be very ripped the same way as Goliath, just on a smaller scale. So, yeah. And then we have to the high priestess, so Mary Magdalene. And in this image of Mary Magdalene, why I have it in this category is because, to me, in this portrayal of Mary Magdalene as the high priestess, this is someone who is very spiritually equipped. And so I look at it as someone who is highly intelligent, who highly divine, and has knowledge that goes beyond that of the living, that of, current circumstances. This is someone who's very connected to, I would say, to the other side, and can see beyond the veil and communicate with those beyond the veil. And so therefore, I see this as someone who is well prepared and equipped to have, to be in full force of their boundaries, if you will. We have the 8 of Feathers. And in this case, we have Jonah trapped inside the fish. Jonah chapter 2. So in this, I see that this boundary here is one that is created based on this image, I would say out of fear, feeling trapped by possibly addictions, negative thoughts, negative feelings, insecurity, and praying for a way out, essentially. That's how I see the 8 of Feathers here, right? And as we know, the 8 of Feathers is a translation to the 8 of Swords, and that's that idea of being trapped inside your own mind, right? And your mind being a boundary that can be very impactful in a very negative way, right? So that's where and why I put this card in this pile. And this card, now you would have seen the colored version in the weak pile, and the reason why I put this again now in this case, the 4 of Chalices, representing Jonah's anger here, is and this is Jonah chapter 4, is because of the idea is, again, sort of speaking back to the hermit, but the hermit to me sort of portrays someone who is seeking enlightenment, who's going within. So they have their boundaries up from outside influences so that they can have a clear view on what's going on internally with themselves, and spiritually speaking. Whereas here, this is someone who is, to me, trapped by their own anger. So someone who is trapped in the lower vibrations of self. They're consumed by their whatever grief or unsettling emotions, in this case, anger, rage, disappointment, because of whatever has occurred to them in their lives. So they're not held in their boundary necessarily for could be for protection in a sort of sense, but in a way that can be portrayed as very forceful. So pushing people away at force, right? And being consumed by all of the negative emotions, jealousy, rage, even envy, as I see jealousy being more of the negative version of envy, because then to me I see envy being somewhere kind of in the middle of things, if you will, because you can be envious of someone but not jealous, in the sense of wishing you were where they were, but not negating that they don't deserve what they worked hard for. Whereas someone who is jealous, in my opinion, sees that person being where they're at and not deserving of what they have, and that person believing that they're more deserving of it than that person, if that makes sense. So anyway, so that's the 4 of Chalices. And then we have the King of Chalices. Nehemiah rebuilding Jerusalem. Nehemiah chapter, if I'm pronouncing that right, chapter 2, verse 17 to verse 18. So King of Chalices. Now this is someone who I see as who is a very strong leader, who is embodying that sense of leadership, who is looking to rebuild, what has been broken. And sometimes you need to step into that role of strong boundaries, because you have to be a strong leader, right? So, and that's why in this case I put it in this pile. Here we have the Knight of Chalices, Joshua, leader of faith, and in this depiction, because in this card again, I did have in the first pile of weak boundaries, but why in this depiction I have this one in this pile is because this one just, in this depiction, he's standing there strong. We don't see the people that in the other card, in the colored version, that was around. This is more of a close-up photo, and so we're really seeing this person standing in their power. So the depiction of it being sort of forceful, that kind of way, or having to be aggressive is not depicted here. This is someone who is standing in their power, and being that true leader of faith. And that's Joshua chapter 1. Okay. Next we have the Queen of Grains. And this is Proverbs chapter 31, woman. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10 to verse 31. And in here we have a woman who is standing in her truth and her power. This is a person of color who looks to be very protective of their bounty, their their food, fruits, vegetables, and their child. So I see that as someone who is a very strong female person, woman of color, who is fruitful both in provisions, food, and also with their child. Okay. Here we have four of grains. This is parable of the rich fool, Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to verse 21. And to me, this here, the 4 of grains, really, really speaks to the idea of hoarding, if you will. And that could be hoarding in any aspect, if you will. And for those that, can understand, what hoarding is like for people, or for those, if you happen to know someone who, is a hoarder, was a hoarder, a lot of the time it is a coping mechanism for trauma. And that, and that can manifest in various ways, and what we hoard. But in this particular depiction, this person looks very happy, right? Sitting in the midst of all his riches. And so, that idea of the rich fool, well, if you remember, I do talk about the financial divide within society, and the idea that the majority of the world's finances being held by the very few, right? So that idea and that division and gap between the wealthy and the poverty stricken, right? And the more and more that, you know, things go on the way that they go on in society, even on a global scale or even within communities, right? And even families, right? We can have that imbalance of finances and how that is even, you know, like now as we progress, you know, that gap between the rich and the poor seems to continue to divide. There's less and less people that are in the middle where you know, where that is concerned. There's a lot less middle class nowadays than there was, let's say 10, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago even. You know, and how that for thousands of years, that's what it's been, the fight between power, you know, and you know, who's entitled to what. Okay. Here we have the King of Feathers. And this is the judgment of Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16 to verse 28. Yes. And in this depiction, we have what looks to be a leader, and around him look to be like, yep, there is a few men here, but there's children and there's women as well. And so to me, in this depiction, this seems like, you know, the idea of a king versus servants. The king versus, you know, again, looking at even society-based, right? We have the government versus everyday people, right? Corporations versus frontline staff. Okay, here we have Page of Feathers, and this is Esther Saves the Jews, Esther chapter 8. And in this story, if even from reading from the Illuminating the Path Within, and in the colored version of this, there is the Bible verse that really speaks to this. Let me just see if it's in here. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I have it in a different pile. But anyways, yes, that's probably what it is. I have it in a different pile. And so with this one, the story behind it is that Esther saves the Jews, meaning that she is willing to sacrifice herself for whatever the reason is. But as long as I'm willing to bargain for whatever king wants for me, but as long as you save my people. So in this case, she is actively, I would say, actively sacrificing her boundaries for the sake of others. And of course, you know, many people will think that, well, that's a martyr move, right? But also, is it though? Because she's making the choice to do what she feels comfortable enough to do, within her power to do, and she's making that choice. It's not that it's being forced upon her. So, to me, in a sense, that still speaks to strong boundaries in a way, because she's taking the reins in what she's allowing and not allowing for herself. Okay. For the Emperor, King Solomon, well, I feel like just the look of him is self-explanatory enough. You know, someone who is firm in their masculinity, you know, as a leader, as an emperor, as a king, Okay. Here, 15, the devil. Now, to me, in this case, why I have this here, the 15, the devil, Satan tempting humans to sin. 1 John chapter 2. So, in this case, this being, strong, forceful boundaries and on the sake of, being influenced by darker, lower energies, being, or succumbing to, or being led by things like addiction, things like anger, right? Manipulation, things like that. Okay. Queen of Candles. Deborah, prophetess and leader. Judges chapter 4. Very much a woman in her power, in her essence, and is looking like someone who is very confident in where she is at and what she's doing. For feathers, Elijah's retreat into silence. So again, this to me speaks back to the idea of the hermit card, right? When we need to take time away, because as empaths, we have, when we're as being sensitive to, energy, and, being easily triggered by, things that are going on around us. And so, even sometimes with social media, needing that time away, to take that time away to rest and recoup, right? And again, we're looking at the 4 feathers. So that really speaks to mental rest, right? Calming the mind, taking peace and time away so that you can clear your mind of chatter. Okay. Here we have the Knight of Feathers, Paul the Apostle, Acts chapter 28, verse 31. And here, this is someone who clearly is speaking on behalf of themselves and what looks to be many in the background. So someone that is again stepping into that role of leadership, of advocacy. Okay. Here we have the shadow. So wrestling with the shadow here. And sometimes our shadows can be overbearing and dominating over us. And especially when we have a lot of unhealed trauma and we refuse or are refusing or denying to do that work or running away from it, we can be battling our shadows heavily. And sometimes in this case, if we don't have our strong enough boundaries put in place, our shadows can overcome us, because we've left ourselves open and vulnerable. However, in this case, in this depiction, Jacob is wrestling with God. Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 to verse 32. And if you remember when I spoke about in the previous video, and I did talk about, that idea of giving into, of course, that was a different card, and there was a space between Jesus and the devil, and what I was discussing in that is the depiction of an understanding that we all have God and the devil within us all. The spirit of both are within us all. And so it's, you know, and I spoke about the, you know, for me, and this is me, you know, that idea of dancing with various devils throughout my life. And coming out the other side, still here, still, you know, ready to walk in faith of love and light. And really, you know, pick through the dark aspects that have really hindered us from understanding the full depth of who we are. And, you know, I spoke about the fact that, yes, my devil is still within me, but is asleep. My devil doesn't control me. I control my devil. And so when we talk about integrating the shadow aspect of selves, it's about bringing into balance the equal parts of self, so that we then are bringing into balance our boundaries. So, right, this would be the balance sort of pile of things, which we'll get into. Hopefully we can do it in this one video, and I don't have to make a part 4. But anyways, we'll see. So that's the shadow. Okay, and then here we have 14, the King of Feathers. This is the Judgment of Solomon, and of course this is a different depiction of a card you would have already seen. I'll just read what's on the card here. Then the king gave his ruling: give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother. 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 27, NIV New International Version. So King of Feathers, and again here's the colored version of the High Priestess with Mary Magdalene. Here we have the 5 of Candles, and if you remember, this card was in the weak boundaries pile, and this goes back to the 5 of Candles, Joseph and his jealous brothers. And in this here depiction we have, come, let's sell him to the Israelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Genesis chapter 37 verse 27, NIV New International Version. So again, this really speaks to that idea of, you know, but in this case, the perspective that I'm looking at in the strong boundaries, the you know, the over boundaries is the brothers and their forcefulness to invade the boundaries of their brother, who is depicted here looking very solemn. And as if you remember, when I talked about this card in the previous video, you know, the idea of this looks like what would, you know, I can see myself in this card, like the empath, and, you know, constantly having people bicker and chatter to me or about me or wanting something from me, and then not giving back, right? So that's where I had to learn my lesson. Okay. And then again, here we have the 7 of Candles with David and Goliath. Here in this depiction, it does look more like a boy, as opposed to a large man. Here, so, you know, this idea of very unfair advantage, but in spite of that, if you know the story, David is victorious anyways. So, okay. And then here we have another 7, and this is the 7 of feathers, and this is the colored version to the the card that I showed in the week boundaries, speaking about Jacob the deceiver. This is the 7 of feathers, as I said. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." Genesis chapter 27, verse 19, NIV, in New International Version. So in this case, what we're looking here is the idea that, yes, this father, his vision is impaired, and we have a son who, I guess, may be jealous of a brother and wants the father's blessing, so he's coming to him and pretending to be, you know, another member of his family as he's not. And the reason why he feels he can get away with it and do it because of the father's eyes being covered, and so the vision is impaired. But as you remember, I did talk about and address the fact that that can also mean an impairment of the mind. So in your mind's eye, someone who is trying to manipulate you and play mind games. So that can also speak to that as well. Okay. Here we have again 14. This is King David, King of Candles. Now, this is someone who looks to be very, again, sort of speaking to the Mary Magdalene, if you will. I would say in this depiction looks like the counterpart to Mary Magdalene, because here we have the King of David, and he seems to be immersed in literature, in words and information. So it's like he is preparing himself for mental battle, if you will, of, you know, in regards to knowledge and things like that. So this is him being equipped with firm, strong boundaries of the mind. And here, I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 9, NIV, New International Version. That's the King of Candles, King David. Okay. Next we have 13, and this is the Queen of Candles. This is Deborah, prophetess and leader. Now, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. Judges chapter 4, verse 4, NIV, New International Version. So again, this is a woman who is very much in her power, is sitting there as a prophetess and leader. 14, we have King of Chalices, and I think you would have seen this again. So this is Nehemiah rebuilding Jerusalem. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. Nehemiah chapter, if I'm pronouncing that right, chapter 2, verse 17, NIV, New International Version. So to me, this really speaks to that idea of rebuilding faith, in rebuilding the idea of dogmatic religion, tearing down, you know, what is been poisoned, what has been misused and abused and misinterpreted and manipulated, right? Tearing that down and getting back to the heart and the nitty-gritty of what spirituality really is. what the truth of Christianity really is in this case, I would say, because it has been so chopped up, so divided, so annihilated, so corrupted even, that now it needs to be torn down and rebuilt. But how are we doing that? Okay. Here again, we have the parable of the rich fool, the 4 grains. And then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions. Luke chapter 12, verse 15, NIV, New International Version. So again, right? It's the lower vibrational energy that need to have to fill our lives with things rather than with, right? And the greed, not even just things, but the greed of money, being money hungry. Again, going back to that divide, if you will, right? And those who are hoarders of money and then have firm boundaries, want to, an example, the rich paying millions of dollars to go to the moon, when we have starving children in society, not just children, people who cannot be housed, cannot eat, don't have access to the proper healthcare and services that they need. Meanwhile, the rich are going to the moon and doing all kinds of weird things. Okay. Just saying. And that includes some serious religious leaders too, who are rich beyond their means and their needs. Okay. 9, again, the hermit, John the Baptist. But of course, this is another depiction. But again, he is up wherever he is in the mountain with his lamb companion, looking so cute. Okay. And then here, last but not least, we have King Solomon again in color, the emperor. Okay. So that would be the strong boundaries, as I said. And now let's take a look at the balanced boundaries. And before I do that, I just wanted to, hold on, okay, so the word that I was really looking for the last pile was rigid boundaries, by the way. But anyways, strong, forceful, rigid, pretty much all the same thing, as I would say. And then in an ideal world, so this is the part of this book that I wanted to get into. So we looked at, rigid, okay? Now, in an ideal world, we are able to develop flexible boundaries as children, which we could soften or harden as necessary, depending on the situation. This is the healthiest option because it means we have a strong identity, we know who we are, and believe that others should treat us with respect. We also are familiar with our limits and do not have difficulty saying no when necessary. To think about your own boundaries, please answer the following questions in your journal. Do you ever ignore your own values or beliefs in order to please people? Do you allow other people to define who you are? Do you depend on others to fulfill your needs? Do you feel guilty when you say no to another person? Do you feel badly about speaking up when you are treated poorly or disagree with others or disagree with someone? And then if you remember in the first video, I did kind of go over this, and then I was explaining about my last name and need and Ned and yada yada yada. But anyways, okay. So when a need is fulfilled, we feel healthy and satisfied. Unfulfilled needs leave us with ill health, frustration, and resentment. As humans, we all share the physical needs of oxygen, water, and food. Different emotional needs, however, will resonate either more strongly or weakly with us because each person is unique. But in varying degrees, most of us have a need to feel safe and secure, connected with others, acknowledged, a sense of control, love and accepted, and that there is meaning in our life. So now into this portion, as I continue to read here from Drea's book, as I mentioned above, our boundaries were often originally generated in response to needs that did not get addressed when we were children. Because they were not filled, these needs continue to haunt us throughout life and into adulthood. To get further in touch with your own needs, please consider these questions in your journal. What did you need as a child from your parents/caregiver? Okay. Now, so in your journal, create a fantasy in which you receive the perfect nurturing from your parents. What would you have been given? What would you have heard your parents say to you? Can you accept having needs without feeling selfish? If not, what is it that you are telling yourself that prevents you? From whom did you learn those messages? And then think about the following beliefs and whether you were able to develop them as a youngster. I have the right to my own opinions. I have the right to feel safe. I have the right to be myself. I have the right to ask for what I need. I have the right to make mistakes. And I have the right to be worthy of love. And also remembering that we also have the right to say no, too. Okay. And then, so the last of that is now going through, just as a reminder of that, the last of that would be going through what I figured would be balanced boundaries. So here we have the Queen of Feathers, and this is Abigail, the peacemaker, 1 Samuel chapter 25. And to me, this demonstrates flexible boundaries, because here we have a what looks to be a divine feminine speaking with a divine masculine, and is negotiating for peace. So they're communicating openly and honestly with one another. Here we have the Two of Grains, Lydia, faithful businesswoman, Acts chapter 16, verse 14 to verse 16. And here she is basically balancing out her resources. Okay. Here we have the Six of Chalices, Jesus and the children, Mark chapter 10, verse 13 to verse 16. So here, with the Six of Chalices, a representation, well, the cups being, a representation of emotions, being balanced with our emotions, and how we interact with various groups of people in society, in this case, an adult with children. Here we have the 8 of Candles, Philip and the Ethiopian, Acts chapter 8, verse 26 to verse 40. And here we have what looks to be, 2 different races of people together, side by side, looking to accomplish a goal. But in this case, wherever they're going to is the goal. Okay. Next, we have the 10 of Chalices, Elizabeth and Zachariah's joy. Luke chapter 1, verse 14 to verse 17. 10 of Chalices. The union of masculine and feminine to create in love a beautiful child. Okay. 8 of Grains, the craftsman. Exodus chapter 31. Here we have 2 people working cooperatively to accomplish a goal, to produce something tangible, represented by the grain suit, of course. Here again, another depiction of 2 divine feminines from different races who are joined together in union, in solidarity with one another. 6 of Feathers, Ruth and the Moabite, Ruth chapter 1, verse 6 to verse 22. And then we have 14 Temperance, Mary and Martha, Luke chapter 10, verse 38 to verse 42. So again, we have what looks like someone bearing witness to a masculine and feminine conversing. Okay. Here we have 7, the Chariot, Pharaoh's pursuit, Exodus chapter 14. Again, sort of the balance with the 2 horses, and that idea of when we are moving forth in our lives, we are doing it in a balanced manner, balancing our emotions, balancing our masculine and feminine energies, and so on and so forth. Here we go. Next we have, again, so this is another depiction of a same card that I reviewed in the week boundaries portion of this series. And this is the 5 of Grains, the bleeding woman, Matthew chapter 9, verse 20 to verse 22. And the reason why in this depiction here I consider it to be balanced is because of the fact that there's space in between these 2. So even though this woman here is presenting as someone who looks to be in need, there's still a divide, a boundary between the 2. And to me, that boundary is that idea of personal space, right? So yes, she's there. She's made herself known to get Jesus's attention. But in the previous one, in the previous video depicting this card in the colored version, we saw the person who was looking to grasp at his cloak, which to me would just be, yes, an invasion of personal space, personal boundaries, without permission, if you will. But in this case, it seems like that's not the case. So thus why it's in this pile. All right, here we have the 4 of candles, the ark brought to Jerusalem, 2 Samuel chapter 6. And of course, we have many people together, celebration, in celebration, in solidarity with one another, and sort of building this sense of community. Of course, then now we have 10, the Wheel of Life, Cycles of Life, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I think that's self-explanatory, where the Wheel of Fortune sort of comes in, and, the balance of all things. 11, we have Justice, the 10 Commandments, Exodus chapter 20. Here we have the 2 of Chalices, the bond of David and Jonathan, chapter 1 Samuel chapter 18. Here we have the 9 of Chalices, the feast of Purim, Esther chapter 9, verse 20 to verse 32. And so again, this sort of speaks to the idea of celebration, community, abundance, and sharing in that abundance with one another. Here we have 8, strength. Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel chapter 6, no, there's no verse, just Daniel chapter 6. And the reason why I put this one in this pile and for balance is because of balance boundaries, is because even though Daniel looks to be sort of destitute or wherever he is, his protection looks balanced because we have the 2 lions here that are there beside him. So I see that as having that strength, that balanced strength of emotions, where, and as I spoke about, merging our light and shadow with one another. Right? And so when we do the healing work, we merge the 2 aspects of self, and that's what makes us whole and makes us balanced. Okay, so here we have, again, this is the 8 of grains, the craftsman, just a different depiction of previous card in the same pile, and this is Bezalel, Oholab, and every skilled person to whom the Lord has given skill and ability to know how to carry out all the work of constructing the sanctuary, are to do the work just as the Lord has commanded. Exodus chapter 36, verse 1, NIV, New International Version. So again, 2 people working cohesively, collaboratively with one another. But in this case, they look to be working side by side, but they have their eyes on their own work. So everybody knows what they're responsible for, and everyone is doing their part. Okay. Again, here we have the 6 of Chalices, Jesus and the children. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Mark chapter 10, verse 14, NIV, New International Version. So it's that idea of not restricting the inner child, not restricting the child from being themselves, allowing that opportunity to just be. With respect and integrity, of course. Thank you. Okay, again, here we have the Six of Feathers, Ruth and Moabite. But Ruth replied, Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, NIV, New International Version. So in this depiction, in the last one, as I showed you with Ruth, here, let me just find the card real quick. These two are standing together. However, in this card, in the colored one, you see them actually holding hands, where you don't see them holding hands in the black and white version of the card. You just see them standing together. And one thing I'm noticing here is in one depiction, we have our Caucasian lady in this image sort of looking off to, or wait, hold on, let me look. Well, she kind of looks like she's looking off slightly. Whereas the person of color is melanated, is looks to be looking directly on. Whereas in this depiction, in the colored depiction of the card, same card, we have they're both holding hands and they're both sort of looking in the same direction. So, this is again about the idea of unity. And with it being the Six of Feathers, moving into unity with one another and of the mind, an understanding of who we each are. Okay. What did I do here? Okay. Something like that. Okay. Okay. Next, again, here we have 11, and this is Queen Esther. Page of Feathers, Esther saves the Jews. And the quote here is, the Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request." Esther chapter 7, verse 3, NIV, New International Version. Okay, here we have 14, the king of grains, Joseph in charge of Egypt. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Genesis chapter 41, verse 41, NIV, New International Version. Here we have 11, we have the page of grains, Priscilla, teaching the teachers. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue when Priscilla and Aquila heard him. They invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately. So here, you know, why I sort of put this one in this depiction here is because we have, you know, an abundance of what looks to be feminine energy here, and the idea of we're all, just because we are teachers and just because we may be experts in some aspects of life, doesn't mean that we're done learning. We're also learning. And so we have teachers to teach teachers, right? And that's sort of where I kind of, I you know, the idea of, again, behind this channel, you know, we're all here to teach, learn, heal, and grow. And I also love this card because of the fact that, you know, we have the character on here who is Priscilla, and based on the image and with the curly hair and everything, reminds me so much of my beloved friend Priscilla of Priscilla's Tarot Corner. And so, and we have done collab videos together before, and one of my favorites that we've done together is, of course, you know, when we've spoken about therapy and tarot and the benefits of combining those together and sort of connecting that with psychology and social work and all of that. So if you haven't seen that video I did with my friend Priscilla, please be sure to check that out. I will definitely have it linked up in the cards for you, and probably down in the description box. So yes. Here we have 12, and this is the Knight of Grains. Jacob works for Laban. Now, in this depiction, we have what someone looks to be like they're lurking. They're doing their work, but they're off looking at someone or something. And as depicted in this card in from Genesis chapter 29 verse 20 from the New International Version, NIV, we have what says, so Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. So based on that, it looks like, okay, we have someone who is respecting, you know, someone he loves boundary. Maybe she's not ready for union or whatever the case may be. And so he's there just observing and admiring from a distance, waiting and hoping for the union to come when she's ready. Now, the thing is, as I put it in this category here, because to me it's like, well, the idea of respecting one's boundaries, right? However, I'm laughing at the depiction because, you know, and I guess this is where it kind of speaks to the idea of the twin flame journey. If any of you who, you know and understand what that is all about, which that could be a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But it's like that idea of, well, she's not ready, so I'm going to sit here and wait like a stalker, just watching. But at least he's respectful of her boundaries. Okay. I guess we'll go with that. 13. So this again is the colored depiction of a previous card, which is in the same pile, and that is number 13, Queen of Feathers, Abigail the Peacemaker. And what it says here is, may you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. 1 Samuel chapter 25 verse 33, NIV, New International Version. So again, that idea of open discussion, of open and healthy debate, honesty, clarity, integrity, respect, honor, right? And the idea that, you know, of being thankful to the other person for being honest and open with you and clear of their boundaries. Because when they do that and you're not getting deceived, you don't need to seek revenge. So that makes everyone happy. Blessed be the peacemaker. Okay. Here again, in the colored version, we have the 7, the chariot, Pharaoh's pursuit. Here again, we have the 2 of chalices, the bond of David and Jonathan. And what is said here is, and Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3, NIV, New International Version. Here we have again 14, temperance, Mary and Martha, and of course again being self-explanatory, because with temperance it's all about balance. That's the idea of the card. And in this case, what is depicted here, and with one person bearing witness, is the balance of the masculine and the feminine energies, balancing of those energies within oneself, and so that we can meet the balanced version of our counterpart. Okay. 7, and this is where, so this one is a little bit more of a closer version to the card of this that I had shown in part 2 of this video when I was going over weak boundaries. And this is 7 of chalices, the temptation of Christ. So here we have, and I'll read the quote here of the verse. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Matthew chapter 4, verse 9, NIV, New International Version. So, right? So here is where now the devil is trying to tempt Jesus, and is a lot closer here in this photo, with him stating that if you worship me, I will give you all this. However, as we know, and actually maybe this is the card I should have, this version of this card I should have put in the weak boundaries pile as opposed to the other one. So let's just say I put this one in the previous and not in this one, because here now this I would say is okay. Let me, where did you put it? Here we go. There we go. So yes, so I feel like I was saying that I feel like I made a mistake. I should have put this version of the card in the weak boundaries pile, and this one in this pile of balanced boundaries, if you will. Yeah, and even this one could have been could have gone in the rigid boundaries, if you will, possibly, or forceful boundaries. Yeah. Anyways, so that's the 7 of chalices. And next we have the again, we have the 8 of candles, Philip and the Ethiopian. And what is written here is, when they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Acts chapter 8 verse 39, NIV, New International Version. Here again, we have the depiction here, 13, Queen of Grains, Proverbs 31, woman, and she sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. Proverbs chapter 31 verse 18, NIV, New International Version. So to me, this really depicts balanced, flexible boundaries because in this case, because this woman, it again equally has her abundant fruits. She also has her child in the next hand, and you know, she looks to be in a very balanced position. Someone who is very much in her power as a melanated woman, and knows her worth, and know that even in darkness, she still is full of light and love. Okay. And then again, we have 11, justice, the 10 commandments. 2, we have the 2 of grains. Again, Lydia, the faithful businesswoman. And here, one of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. Acts chapter 16, verse 14, NIV, New International Version. And last but not least here, 8, we have strength, Daniel in the lion's den. And again, as you can see here, we have the depiction of both, I would say, both depictions of self, a tamed and one that is not so tamed, and finding the strength and balance of each aspect of self within. So those are all the piles that, again, taking from the tarot activity book on boundaries, lovingly gifted to me by Drea Bloom, published under Andy Matzner. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much to Krasimir for gifting me the Biblical Tarot, Shadows of the Soul, along with the Illuminating the Path Within, bigger guidebook for the Biblical Tarot. And so I hope that you enjoyed my video, and will continue to like, share, and subscribe. And, you know, let's again continue this walk of healing with one another, teaching, sharing, and supporting each other on our healing journeys as we continue forth, you know, on our journeys, moving forward. And one last thing that I wanted to leave you is a couple of questions that, again, I came up with myself. And I wanted you to hopefully take the time to reflect on. So, and this is just in regards to triggers, because I know that, you know, especially when, you know, as an empath, we have a lot of triggers, and that can, you know, be something that comes up often, and sometimes can affect how we enforce our boundaries. So one of so a couple of questions that I have for you to close out is, what are triggers exactly? Why is it important to know what they are? And understanding our emotions. What happens when we absorb our emotions versus working collaboratively with them? Are triggers bad? What can our triggers teach us? And how to navigate our triggers when they are activated. How can we be empathic to others' needs while still holding space for our own? And how can we as individuals hold space for others as an empath and when interacting with other empaths? So I hope that you will take everything that I have said in all spans of the 3 videos with a grain of salt. Do your own introspection and reflection. And of course, if you need professional assistance, be sure to seek that out. And of course, if you need help navigating some of those things, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if I can help you with, finding the resources that you need, no problem. Also, be sure to check out my description box, because down below I will always have some limited resources in regards to mental health, especially, for those who are dealing with lots of trauma, and you may be in need of support because of addiction and other things like that. So with all that being said, I love you so much. Thank you for joining me and today, and always taking a gander at my videos. I hope that there is something for you to take away that will be beneficial to you on your healing path and your healing journey. And if you haven't started that, I hope that this will encourage you to start. And as I always say, I am love and so are you. As I see myself as human, I know you are too. And so with all that being said, I hope that you will remember to take care of yourself and one another. And while you're at it, don't forget about me too. I love you so much. And until we chat again, hopefully I will see you on Thursday, June 19th for Juneteenth, a live discussion on my other channel, The Spiritual Void from A to Z, with my beautiful new co-host and friend Hilda from her channel, Nova Scotia's Organic to the Land Stories. Be sure to check her out, and of course comment down below. Hit that notification bell so you'll always be up on the know, and you'll know when we go live for our video on the Spiritual Void next week, which will be at 4:44 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, and until next time, please remember to check your privilege, mind your magic, and as always, live, listen, and learn. I love you so much. Bye, everybody.